Are you trying to make sense of the extended reading lists concerning Stephen King's Dark Tower series? Are you trying to figure out what books belong on the list, which books don't, what order should I read them in? Look no further. This video will tell you everything you need to know on that front and more. Welcome. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am your host here at Dark Tower YouTube, where we talk about the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. There are a lot of these extended reading lists out there, and I did a video where I go through the pros and cons of even doing this at all. And I kind of land on the side of, you really don't need to read any of these books that we're going to talk about. You can just read The Dark Tower, I promise. I've read The Dark Tower several times. I've read almost everything on the extended reading list at least once. So I feel like I can very confidently say, just read The Dark Tower if you want to read The Dark Tower. I promise it's going to be okay. And then look at these things afterwards if you want to. But I do make some points for the pro side of an extended reading list in that video. And I get it. You want to read more. You really love to read Stephen King. You want to see what else is out there. So I can empathize with that. And so this video is for you. There's a lot of videos and lists, though, where they tell you, here's the books I think you should read in this order. So how is mine different? Well, it's different in two ways. So number one, I'm going to tell you why it's related or not, in terms of there's a character in this book that is shared in this book. So in that way, that's a mild, very mild spoiler, I would say. Because if you didn't know that and you just had a character appear, you wouldn't know necessarily that he or she was in another book if you hadn't read that book, or you get it. So this is a mild spoiler when I'm going to tell you there's a character in this book that's in this book. So if you're okay with that, that's about as deep as I'm going to go. And then I'm going to rank how skippable the book is. So even though you're committed to an extended reading list, that doesn't mean you have to read all of the, I didn't even count how many books are on this list. I should have done that, but at least a dozen other books, because some of these are like a pretty strong tie-in where we do have a shared character, and that character is directly impacting the plot or character arcs of what's going on in the Dark Tower. And then there's 50% skippable. So I'm going to say 100% tie-in, 50% skippable, which means we have a shared character-ish or a circumstance-ish, but it's very vague and it's not bearing on the story as much as 100% tie-in would be. And then 100% skippable is a book where we get a brief mention of something tower related. It might just be one sentence in the whole book, where if you know about the Dark Tower, you would say, oh, that's a tower thing, cool. And that's it. There's nothing else in that book that really is talking about what's happening in the main books of the Dark Tower. Makes sense? We've got a lot of books to get through because Stephen King writes his little ass off, doesn't he? So let's get started, and we're going to go through in chronological order. And this is generally the order that I think you should read them in. Why? Well, that makes it easy because Stephen King wrote them in this order. So while he was writing The Dark Tower, he was writing other things. And if something occurred to him that was Dark Tower universe related and he pulled it through, it just makes sense that you would want to see it as it was coming through the author. That makes sense to me. And also it makes it a little easier to do this. We're going to start with 1969's poem, The Dark Man. Yes, that's right, 1969. Now, based on my own rules, this is a 100% tie-in because there is a shared character. So there is a villain, the Dark Man. Come on, we're in Stephen King territory. This is a bad person. This is a villain who shows up as a villain in the Dark Tower series. But this is a poem, and so it's short. It is not bearing directly on the goings-on of the Dark Tower series, but it is a pretty big shared connection. It does give you, I think it's just cool because it gives you kind of context into, insight into Stephen King's mind and development of this villain. And this villain, we're going to be seeing popping up across other stories. So it's cool. But, and It's hard to find this. So there was a reprint of this poem in 2013, and you can more easily get your hands on that than where it was published originally, which I forgot to write down for some reason. But these illustrated poem edition that was released in 2013, you can find it on eBay and places like that, but it's pricey. It's pricey. And for that reason, I'm going to say, yeah, it's 100% tie-in, but you're okay. You really are okay to skip this. So I know I'm not off to a great start, but stay with me. Trust me here. Okay, we're going to move on to 1975's Salem's Lot. This is a 100% tie-in because there is a character in Salem's Lot whom we're going to meet in the Dark Tower book 5, and this person bears heavily on the plot for books 5, 6, and 7 of the Dark Tower. If you decided not to read this book for some reason, Stephen King brings in Salem's Lot word for word, some excerpts from Salem's Lot into the Dark Tower to give you the information that you need. So this is why I'm saying you don't need to read any of these because Stephen King tells you what you need to know. But Salem's Lot is classic King. It's so dang good. Just read it because you want to read an amazing vampire novel. And it does have this strong tie-in, so for that reason, it's 100% on my list. 1978, we have The Stand, which is another 100% tie-in book. We have this villain that is sharing space between The Stand and the Dark Tower. And there's a couple of other things going on in The Stand which are also directly showing up in the Dark Tower. It's a really cool kind of bleed over of a circumstance. And this one, just like Salem's Lot, this is classic King. It's an amazing read. It's one of those this thick books, and so you just want to read this anyway. All right, we finally get to 1982, The Dark Tower, #1, The Gunslinger. We have, this book was revised in 2003. As Stephen King was wrapping up the Dark Tower series, he revised The Gunslinger for reasons he explains in the introduction to that book. So I'm not going to go into that in this video, but just know that he recommends that you read the revised edition. So I'm going to always go with Stephen King. Read the revised edition. That's what he says you should do. That's what I think you should do. There is a school of thought out there, though, that says read the unrevised edition from 1982 and then read the Dark Tower. And then when you're ready to go back to the Tower, because everyone who reads the Dark Tower wants to go back for more trips to the Tower, then read the revised edition. And then you get to see the differences between the two and have some opinions about that. So you can do that. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. But I'm going to say read the revised edition there. Now here's where I'm going to go off track a little bit chronologically. Because after 1982, we have 1984's The Talisman. And this book, I'm going to say, is 100% skippable. It's still on our list, okay? Because there is like an ish. I have a theory. I have a feeling about where the connection is and what it is. But in The Talisman itself, it doesn't spell it out. It's not a clear connection at all. It's a vague connection. It's a feeling. It's a theory. And The Talisman is making up a trilogy. Well, we hope it is. The Talisman, Black House, and this third book, all co-written by Peter Straub. So this is not a straightforward Stephen King book, The Talisman. But it is part 1 of this series, and book 2, which we're going to get to in this list, is more related to the Tower. And I'm hoping that book 3 is most related to the Tower. But for The Talisman itself, it's 100% skippable, and I don't like it that much. Sorry. those of you who love this book, and there are people who love it. It's one of those books on a Stephen King reading list that gets some love and hate. It's not my favorite. I don't know if it's because it's not straightforward King. I found it a bit slow, a bit dragging, a bit plodding. Picked up a little bit at the end. There's a couple characters I liked, but overall, it just wasn't doing it for me. And so, this is why I'm saying The Talisman is not going to go next on our list. So we have 1982's The Gunslinger. And The Gunslinger is also a book that some people find very different for Stephen King. And while I love The Gunslinger, and many people love The Gunslinger, I know a lot of Dark Tower fans and Stephen King fans who hate The Gunslinger and who say similar things about it. It's kind of a slog. It's very slow. There's not a lot going on. So imagine you're somebody that reads The Gunslinger and you're like, man, this isn't as good as everybody said it was going to be. It's kind of dragging on and on. I don't know. And then on your extended reading list, you have to read The Talisman, and you pick this book up and you're like, oh, here we go again. Just more of the same plodding, dragging, slowness. You might just give up altogether. And it's a lot of pages, The Talisman. So for that reason, I'm saying that's not going to go next, even though chronologically it does. I want to give you a shot at The Tower, and that means you're going to move directly from The Gunslinger into the second book of The Dark Tower, which is The Drawing of the Three. This was written in 1987, and it's so good. It's so good. It's why people love The Dark Tower. So if you read The Gunslinger and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know, and then you pick up The Drawing of the Three, I would put money down that within the prologue, you're going to be like, holy shit, did that just happen? Oh my God, I'm in. And the tone changes, and there's humor, and we have new characters, and it's an addictive read. It's much more the Stephen King that we know and love in The Drawing of the Three. So I want to give you a good shot at The Tower by saying, read book 1 and then read book 2. And The Talisman, if you want to put that on your extended list, go ahead, but do it after you get through The Drawing of the Three, just to make sure you're fully in. Because I don't want you to miss The Tower. I really, really, really want you to read The Dark Tower. And this, I think, will just give you a better shot at doing that. Okay, we also have in here that we're also kind of skipping chronologically. The Eyes of the Dragon was written in 1984. So another book that's kind of in between 1 and 2 that I'm saying, we're just going to pull it out because this is 50% skippable. So this shared villain that I've talked about does show up in The Eyes of the Dragon. And you're hearing this similar theme where Stephen King likes to use a similar villain person character. This same guy, slightly different, you know? If you know, you know. So he's there, and there's a mention of some of the characters in this book and a circumstance that happens in the Dark Tower. So they mention people in Eyes of the Dragon very briefly, and then that's it. And the villain in this circumstance really isn't bleeding over into the Dark Tower at all. So because we have some shared stuff, I'm going to say it's 50% of a tie-in, but really it's not something that you really need. Again, I just get caught up because I'm like, you don't need to read any of these. But this is one where if you're like kind of on the fence, you could skip this one. It's not a strong tie-in. 1985, we have a short story called The Mist in the short story collection Skeleton Crew, which you're going to see on extended reading lists. This is 100% skippable. It's a great little novella. I don't know if you can call it that. In and of itself, I just called it a short story. What's the difference? Probably page number. Tell me in the comments how bad I am at this. But this is a story where we get a shared psychological phenomenon. So there's something psychologically weird that happens in The Mist that we also see happening in the Dark Tower. That's the only relationship. So you can skip that one. 1986, so another one that's kind of falling in between chronologically The Gunslinger and The Dark Tower 2. But I'm saying all of these push off to the side for a minute and just get into book 2. This one, it is 50% skippable. It is so interesting because there's a major thematic overlap between it and the Dark Tower. There are cosmic forces at play in it that are also at play in the Dark Tower. And these forces are definitely seen, identified, witnessed by the characters in both stories and are very important to the overall arc of both stories. But the characters are not respectively aware of each other. We are, as the reader, so if you read it and you read the Dark Tower, you're going to easily see this connection. But the characters don't. They're not related to each other. It's just this theme. See, I'm trying to do this without spoilers. How am I doing? It's a really cool, amazing tie-in. And there's also a tiny little Easter egg that Stephen King throws out in the Gunslinger revised edition that's kind of like a throwback to something that's going on in it. But this is another classic King. You gotta read it. You have to. You have to. You have to read it. It's great. And there is this tie-in, so for that reason it's on the list. 50% skippable. That's that. And now that brings us up to 1987, The Dwelling of the Three. But you already read that because you read it after The Gunslinger. Okay. By the way, I'm going to spell these out in the, not the comments, the thing that goes under my video. What the heck is that called? You know what I'm talking about. All right, so we get to 1988's The Reploids. This is 100% skippable because, where did it go? There's a thematic overlap-ish, but it's not something that's one is bearing on the other or a shared character or anything like that. So we just get this brief, like, oh yeah, that's a similar thing happening. So you can skip that one. It's hard to find and it's hard to read as well. We move up to 1991 and we get to The Dark Tower Book 3, The Wastelands. Now, so far on your extended reading list, if you're doing it the way I'm talking about, you're probably having fun. And maybe you read these 100% tie-ins, which were great Stephen King reads, and then you got into The Dark Tower and you got hooked with book 2 and you're just so excited now. And you went back and you read some of those other ones and now you're on book 3 and you're like, wow, this is amazing. This is such a cool adventure. This is where, when you end book 3, that you're going to regret your decision. I would put money down on it that you are going to want to read book 4 immediately after finishing book 3. Let's see how you do there. Now, the good news is you didn't sign a contract, you didn't make a deal with the devil that you were definitely going to do an extended reading order. So you don't have to. You can just read book 4. That's okay. And you can do the same thing like you did with book 1 and book 2. Go back and read the other ones afterwards. It's going to be really hard not to in this case. And also the things that we're going to talk about between book 3 and 4 are pretty skippable. There is, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the only book that you're going to skip over that's 100% tie-in is Insomnia. And you absolutely can put off reading this until before book 7. So just know that. So it's okay if you need to read book 4 after you finish book 3. You'll see why when you get there. And you say, oh, but I feel bad because I left Insomnia in the dirt and it was 100% of a tie-in. Sure. Just read it before book 7 and you'll be fine. All right, and that does bring us to 1994's Insomnia with 100% tie-in. Now, I'm going to get a little more spoilery here. There's no way not to tell you what is happening here. The entire plot of Insomnia is driven by the world of the Dark Tower, and the fate of a character is kind of up to the characters of Insomnia. It's a very strong tie-in. However, the characters in each respective novel don't know about this. If they did, then this would probably be a part of the Dark Tower series. But they don't. And so, because they're kind of just in the dark until book 7, where there is this kind of little bit of illumination to characters in the Dark Tower, learning about insomnia. And you know what Stephen King does? He says, you don't need this. We don't need this. So the characters are kind of like, we don't need to know about insomnia. It doesn't feel very related to what's happening right here in our story. And that is Stephen King really giving you permission to let this one go. I think that's pretty cool and amazing. And let's talk about the characters. So there is a character who appears more briefly in Insomnia that becomes something of a major player in the last book of the Dark Tower series. There is also an exploration of a major theme that happens in the Dark Tower in Insomnia, and a villain, a different villain, who appears in both novels. All of that being said, because I know some of you are like, well, that sounds awesome. Like, why would I even not read that? There's a lot of hate for this book out there. People don't like this book. Some people love it. I know. Tell me in the comments when you think I'm so wrong. I would love to talk about that. I liked this book, but I didn't love it. I don't think it's one that is going to change your life or make you love Stephen King. And Stephen King himself has talked about this isn't his favorite book. So, you know, he got really popular in like the late 70s, 80s. He's killing it. But he writes books with this magical method where he's like, I wonder what would happen if I put characters like this in this situation. And he doesn't even know, and he just writes through it. And we get these amazing stories. Well, at some point he decided he's going to be a real writer in the 90s, and he's going to make an outline, and there's going to be a plot and all of this. And he wrote a couple of books like that, including Insomnia and Rose Madder. And in On Writing, he says, I have written plotted novels, but the results in books like Insomnia and Rose Madder have not been particularly inspiring. They are, much as I hate to admit it, stiff, trying too hard novels. So that's Stephen King himself on Insomnia. If you decide to read this, know that it's okay. It's okay to bail halfway through. There is nothing in this book that you need to know that bears on your enjoyment and appreciation of the Dark Tower. Next up is Rose Madder. So we kind of were expecting that. This is 50% skippable, I would say. No, I'm going to say it's 100% skippable. I'm changing. I don't know why I wrote 50%, because we don't have this shared character. We have a slight overlap of settings-ish, a brief mention of a place that we explore in the Dark Tower in Rose Madder, and the name of the main character in Rose Madder could definitely be seen as a thematic overlap. If you love to pick up on every little Dark Tower thing like I do, there's also a street name that echoes a main character's alias in the Dark Tower. So these little breadcrumbs throughout Rose Madder that are Dark Tower adjacent, but not directly related. I liked this book, though. It is maybe a little more plotted than some of his other stories, but it's about how scary non-paranormal things are, which is cool when we get Stephen King writing about just scary people. And an interesting note on Rose Madder is that one of the characters featured in Rose Madder, a side character, shows up as a main character in the story Desperation, which is next on our list as Dark Tower adjacent. So in 1996, Stephen King wrote Desperation and the Regulators as Richard Bachman, and he released both of them on the same day. And so they're twin novels where we have a thematic overlay. We have characters that have the same name, but they're not the same people. So it's like this mirror image through the looking glass kind of thing that he did, which is super fun and cool. And neither of these books really has much to do with the Dark Tower. So I say these are 100% skippable. Desperation, I really enjoyed. And I think if you want to read it after the Dark Tower, just to get a little more of Stephen King's ideas about God, that's always fun. And then The Regulators, it's low on my list. I don't know if I think it's lower than The Talisman. I just reread this one. So I even reread the Stephen King books that I don't like. That's how much I love Stephen King. And I reread it and I was like, ooh, like I think I understand what he was trying to do here. But for me, it didn't result in a breathtaking, addictive, tears streaming down my face kind of story, which is what I love about Stephen King. Again, the link to the Dark Tower is like thematic at best. And there's a language that Stephen King wrote for the Dark Tower. So there's words, much like Tolkien did for the Lord of the Rings. Now, Stephen King doesn't get that crazy about it, but there's definitely words and a language that's being spoken in the Dark Tower series. And in the Desperation particularly, and less so in The Regulators, we get a little more of this language. We hear it a little more. We see where it came from a little more. But we don't know what it means. So it's there, and it is a link for sure. How does it bear on the Dark Tower stories? It doesn't, in my opinion. Next up, The Dark Tower 4 in 1997, Wizard and Glass. This could be a standalone novel almost. It's so good. It's amazing. On your first journey to the tower, you might become impatient with this book. A lot of people did, including myself, because I can't tell you why, because it's kind of a major spoiler. But if you're feeling like, oh, really? Ooh, come on, Stephen King, I want you to take a deep breath and sit back and relax and enjoy this story on its own. And remember that everything that Stephen King is telling you in book 4 is 100% relevant to the bigger story as a whole. In fact, I'd argue, reading it a few times now, that it holds the keys to the entire series. Next up, 1998's Bag of Bones. This is 100% skippable. There's a location in Bag of Bones that is briefly visited by characters in the Dark Tower, sort of. That's it. Also in 1998, we have The Little Sisters of Eloria. And this is a 50% tie-in. It's a weird one because it's about the main character. So Roland is the main character in the Dark Tower series. And this is a short story about him. So, I mean, I don't know, my rating system is breaking down a little bit here, but I just want to say, even though it's about Roland, it has really nothing to do with the Dark Tower series. So we're just hearing about something else that happened to him. This story is about something that happened to him before the events that we're reading in the Dark Tower. So it's like, oh yeah, we get a story about Roland, cool, and this thing happened to him, awesome. But it bears no relevance. So that's why I'm saying 50% there. It's a good read. It was collected into 2002's Everything's Eventual short story collection. So it was published in 1998 in something. I should write everything down because I think I'm going to remember, but I don't. But in 2002, Everything's Eventual, you'll find it in that collection. In that same book of short stories, there is a short story called Everything's Eventual. And that is a 100% tie-in because we have a character featured in that story that shows up in the Dark Tower and is directly related to the plot and action that are going on in book 7. 1999. Oh, my light's getting weird here. Hang on. Is that better? Yes. Okay. 1999, we have Hearts in Atlantis. This is a 100% tie-in. So this is a collection of short stories that are loosely related to each other. The first one, called Low Men in Yellow Coats, features a character that shows up in the Dark Tower 7 who is integral to the action and plot that are happening in book 7. In Low Men in Yellow Coats, we get his background on this person, which is cool. The rest of the stories in this collection are not really related, but just read the whole thing anyway. This is an amazing thing, and it really is, again, one of those Stephen King things where not a lot of paranormal stuff going on in these stories. It's real life people doing horrific things and dealing with it, processing it. They made a movie. They made a movie of Hearts in Atlantis, starring Anthony Hopkins, and they took out all of the Dark Tower references. So if you saw that movie and you're like, I don't remember the Dark Tower stuff, you wouldn't. And even if you read this, you wouldn't know from Low Men in Yellow Coats that this man is going to go on to be in the Dark Tower series. But when we look back, we say, aha, there's a lot of connections there that we're hearing about. They took it out of the movie. Why would you do that? These movie makers who think they know more than Stephen King, they're like, that Stephen King book was amazing. I'm going to make a movie of that and totally change it. I don't get it. I don't understand. Nobody asked me, though. 2000, On Writing, which is nonfiction. I'm putting it on this list. And it's not on most other lists, but it is a 100% tie-in. It is extremely relevant, and you will know it when you see it. I highly recommend that you don't leave this off of your list. Also, it's amazing in and of itself. And Stephen King narrates it on Audible. So you can go listen to him tell his story about writing. So good. It's so good. 2001, Black House. So this is the sequel to The Talisman. This is a 50% tie-in. And I didn't really like The Talisman, but I really liked Black House. And I'd put off reading this for a long time because I just wasn't into The Talisman. I read this after I read The Dark Tower, and you don't lose anything by not reading this beforehand. There are more Tower tie-ins, though, so I was delighted to find them when I finally did getting around to reading it. There is a mention of Dark Tower stuff in Black House, where we're being told there is definitely a link between these two, well, this trilogy and this story. So in The Talisman, we don't get that at all. I don't even know if the authors knew it was there. I don't know. But in this book, they definitely did, and they're definitely tying it together. And it's a great Stephen King book. It's also Peter Straub, but it feels more King to me. Okay, so just to recap those two books, you read them, and you have to read The Talisman before you read Black House. But you could skip The Talisman, but read a summary. You really need the information, even if you found it not great. And maybe you love it. And Peter Straub and Stephen King had a third book in mind, but unfortunately Peter Straub passed away in the last few years. And so it was like, oh, I guess we're never going to know what they were going to write. But Stephen King has been dropping hints about writing this third book based on the notes that he had, the outline that the two brilliant writers had. So I think he's writing that now. I think we're going to get it. We'll see. So for that reason, for sure read these, but you don't need to read them in between Dark Tower books. 2002. We're getting there, guys. We're almost there. 2002, From a Buick 8. This is 100% skippable. It's on the list because the eponymous Buick is tied to some cars that show up in Low Men in Yellow Coats and are connected to characters in the Dark Tower books 5 through 7. The main character in From a Buick 8 also shares a last name with the alias of a main character in the Dark Tower. And yes, it's the same name that was on the street sign in Rose Madder. But you're not missing anything if you don't read this on an extended reading list. Okay, now we get up to October 2003. We have book 5 of the Dark Tower series, The Wolves of the Kala. And following very quickly on its heels, we have June of 2004, The Dark Tower 6, The Song of Susanna, and September 2004, The Dark Tower 7, The Dark Tower. These were published in very quick succession. King wrote them kind of all at once after something happened in 1999. And I would read all of these just like that. That's the chronological order. I wouldn't put anything in between them. It was kind of written all in one go, and it's really just separated out so the book wasn't bigger than the books that he usually writes, I think. So we've finished The Dark Tower, or have we? In 2006, there's a book called Cell, which you're going to see showing up on some of these lists. It's a 100% skippable. There's a character in Cell that is writing comic books, and when you see what's in the comic books, you're like, oh, he's making a comic book about the Dark Tower. That's so cool. That's about it. There's a Dark Tower villain that's briefly mentioned, but you can skip that one. 2009, a book called I wonder if I'm saying that right. I'm going to say This is a short story found in a bazaar. What's it called? The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. So short story collection. And I love this story. It's really fun. It's a great read. Definitely connected to the world of the Dark Tower. You're going to see it and say, oh, wow, how about that? But that's it. It doesn't bear on your reading of the series whatsoever. It's also one of the very few Stephen King stories that I was smiling. I was smiling at the end. I thought, oh, we have a happy ending. That rarely happens in this world. Sometimes it's bittersweet, but this one, pretty good. 2012, we have The Dark Tower, The Wind Through the Keyhole. So this is Stephen King going back to The Dark Tower and saying, I wasn't quite finished. I thought I was, but I wasn't quite finished. And he calls this book 4.5 of The Dark Tower because it falls in between book 4 and 5 chronologically in the story. So the story that he's telling is happening between book 4 and book 5. I would say read it when he wrote it, though. We're going to stick to this chronological reading order. This is 100% tie-in because it is a Dark Tower book. And it is because we're talking about the main characters in the Dark Tower and what they were doing. And so we get about 30% of them and what was going on in their world. And then we get the rest of it is like a story within a story within a story. So we get a little bit removed from the events and plot of the Dark Tower itself. However, I think there's a huge thematic overlap here, which is the whole reason that King went back and wrote this book. There was something going on in the Dark Tower story that he didn't feel was wrapped up as neatly as maybe he wanted it to be. And maybe that was keeping him awake at night, and he thought, I've got to tie that bow up because it was really important to the main character. And I think he does a great job, and this book left me crying. It's a fun read. It's different than the rest of the story. Again, it's not 100% related, so you're not missing anything if you don't read it in between 4 and 5. It doesn't bear on things that happen before and after, but it's our characters. So I want you to read it, just read it after, in the order that it was published. So from that point on, I don't know of any other stories that have a tie-in. And I kind of haven't read a lot. No, that's not true. I've read some, but I've got some reading to do after 2012. Stephen King just keeps writing. I can't keep up. There is a series, a trilogy called Gwendy's Button Box, Gwendy's Magic Feather, and Gwendy's Final Task, written in 2017, 2019, and 2022. He co-wrote with Richard Chismer. And this is I don't know because I didn't read it. I was going to say a 50% tie-in, 100% tie-in. From what I've heard, it ties in directly to the world of the Dark Tower. And perhaps there's a shared character. And maybe it bears on the story more than we know. I'm interested to read it. It's on the list. It gets mixed reviews, which I think is why I haven't pulled the trigger yet. So people kind of say, yeah, the first one's pretty good and a strong tie-in, but the second one, not so much. I hated the second one. And whenever I hear a lot of pans, I'm like, I'll put that one off. So I haven't read those. I can't give you my full report on them. Just know that they're there. And if I would say they belong on an extended reading list, even though I haven't personally read them myself. Oh my gosh, we did it. That's my extended reading list. That's what's going on in these stories. That's the order that I think you should read them in. You have no more excuses now. You've got your list. You need to go and get Salem's Lot is where you want to start. Go get it. Start reading. Get ready for the ride of a lifetime. And once you get to the Gunslinger, come back to Dark Tower YouTube, where we've already done a couple of videos about what's going on in those books, what's happening magically, metaphysically, psychologically is where my lens is usually pointed. Come back and join us for the Gunslinger and all 7 books in the series, and then who knows, maybe I get to some of these other books once we're finished 25 years from now. All right, my beautiful Stephen King, Dark Tower future friends. Thanks for being here. Thanks for liking and sharing. Until we meet again, may you have long days and pleasant nights.